the rest of this week's talking points is what I should say. Right, the start of the dash was clearly unsatisfactory. There were at least 4 stalls that didn't open in time with all the other ones. What could or should the BHA have done when they realised this, Eve?
I think it's really hard, because if you void it, that's a nightmare. If you make them non-runners, it becomes more of a nightmare for each way horses, because it takes them out of the game. If you watch it, something's head-butted the stalls on that side, which they've gone earlier, and I just think... it's
a horse's action that's created a stall's malfunction. We're going to have a look at it now. Have a look to the left of shot from stall.
See,
there we are.
14.
It was 17 that broke the stall, and 16, 18, 19, 20 were the ones that stayed in a fraction of a second longer than the others.
And I know a fraction of a second makes a difference, but I think they did the only thing they could do and just let it stand.
So it's an unsatisfactory situation, but what would you have done anything different, Dave?
Well, I think that it's one of the sort of fundamental rules of betting that everyone starts from the same place. And, you know, I tipped Ancient Times in that race. The 4 horses affected, Ancient Times, Vintage Clarets, Lihu and Live in the Moment, they finished in that order 15th, 14th, 20th and 17th. And I feel that, you know, if you can't win, you shouldn't be able to lose.
Okay. So should they have been called non-runners, then, those 4?
I think that in a really tricky situation, that might have been the best solution, to say the start of those 4 horses was compromised and we're going to declare them non-runners. Obviously, like, it's Derby Day, there's Whirlpool, blah, blah, blah. But I think... personally, in a really difficult situation, I think that would have been the least worst solution.
Okay, so 1 vote for, leave it is not ideal. Another vote for maybe make the horses whose gates didn't open on time non-runners. What would you have done?
We ran a horse in a 3-year-old dash called Dickie Bird, and I said to the owners, if he isn't in front early, he can't win. He was in front early, but if he's in that race and he's drawn high, he's in trouble. If you could do it so that you're still paying out 4 places for the punters, that would have been an amicable resolution, I would have said.
You do wonder to what extent they don't want to whip up a hornet's nest when you've got Whirlpool as well in a big field like that. Let's just take a look at Kieran ONeal. He tweeted yesterday, and he was on Live in the Moment. In the words of the BHA, not materially affected in the fastest 5-furlong race ran. The gates marginally slower to open. 75% of the field had jumped before somebody even opened. Drawn 20, my horse's head nearly got stuck on the centre. So that is more grist to Dave's mill, Eve.
I just think it's a no-win situation, isn't it?
There is, however, a more serious underlying point here, in that if a horse anticipates the gate like that, the effect that it should or could have on the remainder of that portion of the starting gate. So stall 14 burst the gate open. A random selection of stalls to his stand side have decided not to open.
Yeah, it's not. They need to be.
The engineering's not great, is it?
The engineering's not great.
If we can build buildings that are kilometres in the air, surely we can fix a stall situation.
But isn't the problem is that they're all mobile, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're all being schlepped around the country all the time.
We need consistency, and we need a system that's fair. That race, I mean, it's cool that it happens in that race where the start is probably the most important race of the year, where the start is, crucial.
Okay, let's take a look at the dash for 3-year-olds. New race. My reservations here about why there were only 14 runners, but more of that in a moment. I just wanted to look at Marco Gianni, who performed a manoeuvre not long after the start of the race. He's in the black colours there, where he came across Harry Davis, who was riding Russet Gold, who was the second favourite. And you really kind of need to see a little bit before this as well, because he had to have known that Harry Davis was there. Now, the stewards banned him 6 days for careless riding. You can debate the merits of the length of the suspension as long as you want, and I'm certainly not trying to just serve it up to Marco Gianni, a very likeable young guy who's trying to make his name again after a difficult period. But, Dave, if that is careless, where do the stewards get to irresponsible and dangerous? I mean, if that's only careless...
Yeah, it does make you wonder where the bar is set,
it's pretty... you can get away with quite a lot for being careless.
And that wasn't the end. Well, that wasn't all either, was it? Because there was a use of the right elbow aboard Tallulah Mila. You said Harry Davis was a well-balanced jockey on a horse, Eve. It's just as well.
Yeah.
Just as well.
Because
That was total wipeout, really,
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it really was.
yeah. I mean, I thought, say, like, Marco Gianni is a very promising jockey, as you say, who's just come back from a ban and he's rebuilding, and we know about his talent. He's a champion apprentice of the past. But you just have a look at this.
He's got to know that Russet Gold's on his inside here. I mean, they've come together, so he now. That according to the BHA stewards, and it's really the BHA stewards in the crosshairs here, Nick. That's careless riding.
Yeah, it's a fine line. His instruction from his connection might have been, given his stall position, get to that rail as soon as you can. So
he's single-minded tunnel vision to do that.
If he doesn't do that, he might not ride the horse next time. Look, it is careless. I'm not an expert in terms of what what should be done, but I can see why it's happened.
Okay, let's move on to John Dance, the prominent owner who has been investigated by the Financial Conduct Authority. This story's taken a new development this week, Dave.
Yeah, it has. Obviously, this story started at the beginning of April, didn't it? When the Financial Conduct Authority said that they had ordered WealthTech to cease operations amid after the arrest of a 48-year-old man and concerns about the way that the company, the other two, of course, Vertem Asset Management and Malak Melville, they all trade together, or at least they're all John Dance's companies. Then we had the business with Brave Man's Game running or not running at Aintree, then running at Punchestown. Now, there's been something of a sort of hiatus over the last few weeks. This week it was that the FCA took the story on quite a bit further, actually, to say that they are investigating evidence of criminal fraud and money laundering, and the headline was that there is an £80 million black hole. More specifically, the FCA said they were aware of a shortfall of £81.4 million in client assets and money associated with WealthTech as of April the 6th. So that takes the story on quite a bit further. Obviously, John Dance, very well known owner under both codes, Brave Man's Game, and I suppose Lawrence would be his highest achieving horse on the flat.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the interesting point about this from a horse racing point of view is the fact that the FCA appears to have ring-fenced the racing operation and allowed that to continue, but to what end, nobody really knows. So.
James Horton had runners back last weekend, didn't he? After a long hiatus.
Anything to add, Nick?
At the sales, where I'm pretty low down the pecking order in terms of my choice of horses that I can buy, and when somebody's going to the sales and buying these horses above me in the ranks with money that they don't have, or it seems like they don't have, it's not fair on me and everybody else who is further down the food chain. So, I think the situation needs to investigate. In terms of the horses being allowed to run, again, I would question whether they should be allowed to run because they've been bought with funds that it seems like they aren't there. So everybody else is being disadvantaged and by them being allowed to run.
Of course, what the BHA have to do in their dealings with the FCA is to try and, as best possible and responsibly and within the law, look after a workforce and ensure that the future of those horses in the short and medium term is viable.
Yeah, look, it's not a great situation for all of us. I just feel that, I'm seeing it from my point of view. From the vendor's point of view,
and
they're
it's a very
delighted.
one, and it's one that I haven't heard that much either.
From the vendor's point of view, they're delighted because they all got paid out when the horses were sold, but they were effectively bought with money that didn't exist. That's can't be great for the game.
much talk again this week about Premierisation as the debate continues as to whether the plans being put in place by the industry and led by the new BHA board are the correct plans for the shop window on a Saturday afternoon. Carmel this week said they would be one of the tracks that would be forced to change more than others. They were quite happy with the Premierisation plans shelving into line. I've got a question for you, Eve, with Premierisation. I'm quite happy with the central concept of getting the Saturday afternoons to shine more, but yesterday, Derby, if industry is really serious about burnishing the big races, driving turnover for the best we've got, why are Musselburgh not starting till after the Derby's been run? At 1:30 Derby, why did they start at 1:15? Why can't it start at 2:30?
I don't think they thought it through. I honestly just don't think anyone thought about it yesterday, because of the 1:30 Derby. All they've got is the can't be between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and next year. I don't think anyone thought about it this year. And it's a very, very good point.
But isn't that the case that we've always got to be alive to opportunities?
Of course. And I think I don't have a real problem with the Premierisation, but surely Ireland are just going to fill the gap. And then what do? We might as well have English racing as Irish racing.
That's a good point, Dave. I mean, really, this is where Ireland and the UK, if they are both going to benefit from this model of the way punters behave during a Saturday afternoon, if these behavioural studies are correct, then surely it would benefit both countries and the betting revenue garnered for them to be cooperating.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I thought this was an interesting story this week because, of course, you've had the likes of Thirst Catterick threatening legal action.
Yeah.
We've had Musselburgh, Chester, horses whose footfall will be hit by Premierisation. It's not a word, and I can't pronounce it.
It's not a word either.
And Cartmel this week have said, "Well, we will see what happens," and have been a little less on the front foot with the threat of the legal action. I think with I thought Lee Moss had made an interesting point about how much do these races that are so far lower down the food chain, how much do they really impact on a race like the Derby, for example, yesterday? And also, I like the idea that the BHA, to all intents and purposes, have taken back a measure of control of the fixture list. You can argue that maybe that's a bit of a fudge, I think, but on the face of it, I welcome that. But with the thing I don't really understand with regard to racing shop window, the ITV races, like I write tipping pieces on virtually every ITV race that is ever done. Right. So what is it every week? It's a minimum of 7,
it's about
and it's normally 9 or 10
on an ordinary.
So over the course of a programme. So that shop window is going to have as many items in it. It's just going to be as cluttered, isn't it? And this thing of telling the stories, which personally
Do you think that's a bit bonus bonus, though?
Well, I do personally, because, the fact is that British racing at the top level, it's not like, when the Kentucky Derby is on and it's the walk to the... Is it called the Derby Walk? Is it
walkover.
When they walk to the start and you interview the good old boys who have,
The walkover.
Right, OK. So every time that's on, there's a thing on Twitter, isn't it, saying, like, why can't British racing this? It's because those owners aren't as accessible.
Apart from Nick Bradley and Ahmad Al-Sheikh.
Yes, of course, there are exceptions. But we know that, that Coolmore Triumvirate, or partners now, they're not going to tell you their life story. Similarly, lots of other owners who come from the Middle East are not there to open up about, any sort of Damascene conversion that they've had in their lives when they came to horse racing.
I think I know where you're going here.
And so we're not comparing light with light. But to go back to that ITV thing, it's like, well, there are still going to be 8, 9 races. If you get 7 on a Saturday,
it's not. But
this is
so.
right.
But the truth of it is, isn't it, Nick, that they're trying to create an optimal gap between each race where they think that there is enough for people to bet on, in nice evenly spaced chunks, without it being so much that it stops their eye being drawn to the next betting opportunity. It's much more to do with that, isn't it, than this idea that it's going to, as Dave said, materially change the way the sport is promoted on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, this story was one that I kind of missed. I spent a week at the
Lucky
cricket.
you.
I spent a week at the cricket, but I don't think it's too broke to begin with. But I get the idea behind promoting stories with these big races. But yeah, a lot of these big races involve the same people week in, week out. So yeah, good luck on your job trying to organise that.
Look, it's Nick Bradley racing again. Getting thoroughly hacked off with this now.
No, I'd never be hacked off, but yeah, you might find some other people who've got less patience than I have.
Sylvester de Souza, he's a jockey that you've used quite a bit, isn't he?
Yeah, I knew Sylvester years ago. I remember when he was a £7 claimer at Dandy Nichols, and we had Sylvester there and Adrian there. And Sylvester, I remember walking into a racecourse, I think it was Thirsk, and Sylvester was there with his vest, and he had these great bulging biceps, and I'm feeling quite intimidated by them. Awesome jockey. I can see why he's gone out to Hong Kong. Obviously, the issue that he's had, is not ideal.
So he's got a 10-month ban. He's decided not to appeal it now.
Yeah. I don't want to get drawn into the ifs and ands, but Sylvester's, he's always been a good guy. I don't think, in my experience, although he's earning a great living, I'm sure he's been caught up in something that he would have chosen not to in hindsight.
Yeah. So the case that came about and the offence he was charged with was facilitating another rider having a bet on a horse that other rider was riding in a race. There was no suggestion that Sylvester rode in any way that was prejudicial to the integrity, but integrity standards, as they should be, are very high in Hong Kong. Dave, this leaves him though with 10 months to kick his heels at the moment. He's got to apply to get back and ride out and all that kind of thing from the BHA if he wants to do that.
Yeah, in the immediate aftermath of news of the ban, news of the appeal followed pretty swiftly, didn't it? And we were wondering whether it might be against the severity of the ban. Like Wagner Borges had backed Young Brilliant at Happy Valley. He got 12 months, and Sylvester de Souza got 10 for facilitating the bet. So we were wondering whether there might be an appeal against the penalty, the stiffness of the penalty, or indeed, other aspects of it. I think the interesting thing with this now is what route he might go down. Does he sit out the 10 months and say, right, I'll come back, or come back and ride in Britain? Does he call on the BHA to maybe look at the severity of the ban and reduce it slightly? That's a massive call now with world pool betting, isn't it? Britain and Hong Kong
jurisdictions even before World Pool didn't like not reciprocating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at Rab Havlin's. Do you remember Rab Havlin's ban in France? That the PJA came out and said it was manifestly unfair, and the BHA seemed to be supportive of that idea, but they weren't not going to reciprocate.
I completely agree with that. It's extremely rare that they're not reciprocated, but the sort of financial hitching ourselves to the punter's star in the Far East, it is an additional factor, isn't it? I can't see it happening.
There are many new members of the Professional Jockeys Association board this week. It has grown and swelled significantly. Most of them are jockeys. One notable non-jockey is the former boss of Great British Racing, Nick Attenborough, who looks set to become the new chair of the Professional Jockey Association. That position has remained vacant since John Holmes resigned. He was joined in his resignation by fellow board member Simon Cox, who'd done an awful lot of work behind the scenes getting jockeys a fairer deal. The jockeys themselves feeling that they weren't being particularly vocally or fairly represented, particularly in issues pertaining to the new whip rules. We are expecting Ian McMahon, the current chief executive of the PJA, to be going any minute now. I think that has caused a fair bit of rancour. Eve, the PJA is a bit of a mess at the moment, isn't it?
It would appear so, yes. It's very difficult. I'm on the NTF Council, and I know how difficult it is to get trainers to engage. And I think they find it really difficult for jockeys to engage. They think it's someone else to sort it out. Someone else to sort out the whip ban. I don't need to worry about it. And then when it happens, they're all up in arms. But you have to engage.
And they had Tom Scudamore and PJ MacDonald at the time engaging. The suggestion was that the current chief executive, or the outgoing chief executive, we presume Ian McMahon, was not sufficiently visible during that during that process. I suggested earlier in the week, Dave, on my podcast, that there should be a regulatory liaison officer for the PJA, and then a chief executive who's there to actually properly represent jockeys politically, financially, and with their well-being. And the two roles should be separate.
Yes, I think that's very fair. But as Eve says, you've got to have that engagement in order even to facilitate that, haven't you, or to effect it. We've got Henry Brooke, Neil Callan, Tom Marquand, Andrew Mullen, John Joe O'Neill Jr. and Tabitha Worsley are the other 6. But it is an unholy mess. I mean, I won't revisit everything that I've said about the whip over the last 10 years, but jockeys, since the new rules have come in, we've gone well past 1,000 days worth of
bans,
suspensions now, haven't we? Which, this was supposed to be a PR exercise. How that's good PR for racing, how that is going to, and it wasn't an ethical or a welfare decision. It was a commercial one to try and attract people to a sport that they might be put off by use of the Pro-Cush whip. And how over 1,000, how telling the public that these jockeys have been given over 1,000 days worth of suspensions because they've used the whip improperly. How that's good PR. If that's good PR, I'm a banana.
I don't think it's the number they are in trouble with, it's the technical bit of it. Like someone suddenly decided that if they've hit them within 2 strides, then you've got to have 4 days, rather than hitting them within 3 strides. Well, I don't think that bit's been thought through myself.
We are sort of moving away from the central issue as regards the PJA, but of course this is the reason why there's a change of personnel at the top. Are they getting to the right solution though, Nick?
Again, I don't know, but what concerns me is that professionals are losing an ability to earn a living. A jockey's lifestyle is not glamorous in many scenarios. They work incredibly hard. They have to travel up and down the country. I'd just be concerned that the lower end jockeys who are suffering these bans, some of them will think, well, maybe I should go and do something else. That would be my concern.
Okay, let's talk about a jockey that again found herself in the regulatory wires this week. Charlotte Jones has been by far not the most high-profile rider to ride a finish a circuit too early recently. We saw it with Neil Callan at Kempton. We arguably saw it with Rachel Blackmore in Ireland. That's a different story. Managed to get away with 5 days in the end. Charlotte Jones received a suspension for doing it at Cartmel. Her boss, Jimmy Moffat, defended her, and rightly, in my opinion, Nick, defended her against the abuse she was receiving on social media. But he then kind of conflated that with, well, I'm going to stick up for her when the BHA won't. Well, if you ride a finish a circuit too early, you're going to get a ban. I mean, that's the beginning, middle and end, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's human error. We all make mistakes in what we do. The problem is when a jockey makes a mistake, millions of people are watching it, and it's there, and it's in front of everybody. I entered a horse the other day in a maiden, and she'd won a month earlier, and nobody noticed that. So I maybe shouldn't be broadcasting.
Hang on. Whoa. Back up. Start that again.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that when jockeys make...
No, not that bit. You entered a horse in a maiden.
She won a maiden. So when you've got a 2-year-old, this time of year you run maiden or novice, and we have 52-year-olds. And anyway, she'd won a maiden at Beverley, and we accidentally entered her in a maiden at Thirsk last week. And
so when did she win the maiden at Beverley?
About 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Oh, so plenty of time. Yeah.
Well, she wasn't able to run.
Yeah, but it was so she obviously wasn't able to run. But my point is, nobody saw me make that mistake. And in this scenario, when she did make the mistake, she's going to get, she's open to social media channels which can be incredibly unkind. And a lot of these jockeys are young. People who are learning about life. You've got to be mentally tough to be able to take that. And I see why the trainer stood by her.
Oh, I'm completely with you that the trainer should stand by her and support her and give her all the support she and also nobody's going to disagree with someone who takes on idiot trolls on social media. But if you're the regulator, you just got to regulate according to the rules, haven't you?
it's just tough that young people are in the in front of everybody, and that could I'm sure that she won't forget about that for a long time.
Okay.
Well, she doesn't need people to point out a mistake.
No.
Is what we're trying to say, because you make mistakes, you know you've made a mistake. You don't need idiots on social media telling you about it. Miles, thank you very much for pointing it out. I hadn't actually noticed. Do they think you're stupid? Clearly.
Yeah.
But there are lots of things the BHA can do, but
they can't
running social media isn't one of them. We all know what the solution is, and that is that if you open a social media account, you should supply documentation that you would if you opened a bank account, or you would register a card, a bank card yourself or on behalf of somebody else. It's like if you have a Times or any newspaper subscription behind the paywall, the response is none of them are hateful or illegal, etc., because the person has got a card registered and they can't say what they might want to. But of course on social media it's like the Wild West. It'll cost them many, many millions of pounds, and that's why they don't want to do it. But it ain't the BHA's fault for once.
All right, those were this week's talking points.
Subscribe to Racing TV's YouTube channel now to watch more great races like this.